the heart of Silverbrook Plaza, a luxurious shopping destination, an ordinary shopping trip turns into an extraordinary fight for justice. Amara Sinclair, a poised and accomplished woman, faces a humiliating act of discrimination while searching for an anniversary gift for her husband. What begins as a deeply personal injustice soon unravels into a larger conspiracy led by a powerful adversary. With the support of her husband Elijah and a determined team of allies, Amara embarks on a mission to uncover the truth, confront prejudice, and demand systemic change. This inspiring story highlights the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of unity in the face of adversity. Before we dive into this gripping tale of courage, justice, and transformation, comment below where you're watching from today. And if you enjoy this empowering and inspiring story, don't forget to subscribe. A storm of quiet discontent was brewing in the heart of Belmont Heights, where elegance and extravagance coexisted within the walls of its iconic Silverbrook Plaza. The air within the sprawling luxury mall carried the scent of fresh-cut roses, leather goods, and gourmet coffee, a testament to the affluence of its patrons. Yet, beneath this polished exterior, tensions simmered, waiting a moment to break the facade of perfection. Amara Sinclair, a poised and accomplished black woman, walked through the grand atrium, her heels clicking softly against the gleaming marble floors. She moved with purpose, her every gesture exuding grace and confidence. Today, she wasn't just another shopper admiring the sparkling displays of Silverbrook's renowned stores. She was a wife on a heartfelt mission to find the perfect anniversary gift for her husband, Elijah Sinclair. Elijah, the soft-spoken yet powerful owner of the plaza, was known for his philanthropic efforts and sharp business acumen. His presence in the city had transformed Belmont Heights into a hub of culture and inclusivity. But Elijah's fame was always understated. His preference for keeping his private life separate from his public persona, allowing Amara to navigate her daily life without the weight of their status overshadowing her. As Amara entered Radiance Gems, an upscale jewelry boutique, the doorbell chime announced her arrival. The store's atmosphere was as polished as its diamond-encrusted displays. Amara's eyes scanned the rows of glittering pieces, her gaze settling on a stunning necklace adorned with cascading sapphires, a piece she imagined Elijah would admire as much as she adored him. Before she could call for assistance, a tall blonde saleswoman stepped forward. Though polite, her name tag read Evelyn Hart, and her expression carried a veneer of disdain. "Can I help you?" Evelyn asked, her voice cool and detached. Amara smiled warmly. "Yes, I'd like to see that necklace, please." She gestured toward the sapphire piece resting on a velvet stand. Evelyn hesitated, her sharp blue eyes narrowing slightly. There was an almost imperceptible pause before she unlocked the display case, her movements deliberate and overly cautious. She placed the necklace in Amara's hands but leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a condescending murmur. "This is one of our most expensive pieces," she said. "Are you sure this is within your range?" Amara stiffened at the subtle insult, but her composure remained intact. "I'm sure," she replied evenly, holding Evelyn's gaze with unwavering confidence. As Amara admired the necklace, imagining the moment she would surprise Elijah with it, Evelyn's voice cut through her thoughts, louder this time. "I think it's best if you put that back now," Evelyn said, her words sharp and accusatory. "We wouldn't want any misunderstandings." The room seemed to freeze. Amara's stomach sank as other shoppers began to glance in her direction. Evelyn's tone carried an unmistakable implication, and the eyes of those around her mirrored the unspoken judgment. "Excuse me?" Amara asked, her voice steady but tinged with disbelief. Evelyn folded her arms, her demeanor growing more hostile. "I don't want to call security, but if you don't return that necklace to the case right now, I'll have no choice." Amara's hands trembled as she gently placed the necklace back on its velvet pad. The humiliation burned in her chest, but Evelyn waved to a nearby security guard before she could respond. The man approached quickly, his imposing figure casting a shadow over the confrontation. His name tag read Mark Dillon, and while his expression was calm, the situation was anything but. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice measured. "This woman," Evelyn said loudly, "was attempting to steal this necklace." Gasps rippled through the small crowd that had begun to gather. Amara felt her cheeks flush as dozens of curious eyes bore into her. Some bystanders whispered, while others raised their phones to capture the unfolding scene. Mark looked at Amara, his brow furrowing slightly. "Ma'am, I must ask you to step aside for a moment." Amara nodded, forcing herself to remain composed. "Of course," she said quietly. Mark led her out of the store and into a quieter hallway. The whispers and camera flashes followed them, amplifying her sense of vulnerability. They arrived at the security office, where Mark gestured for her to sit. "Can you tell me what happened?" he asked, his voice softer now. Amara recounted the incident, her words steady, despite her humiliation. Mark listened intently, his jaw tightening as she finished. "Thank you for explaining," he said after a pause. "I'll review the security footage to confirm your account." Left alone in the small room, Amara's mind raced. The pain of the encounter mingled with a rising determination. This wasn't just about her, but the broader injustice that too many people like her faced daily. When Mark returned, his expression was grim but resolute. "I've reviewed the footage," he said, handing her a glass of water. "It's clear you didn't do anything wrong. I'm deeply sorry for the way you were treated." Relief washed over Amara, but it was tinged with anger. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm. "But this isn't the end of it. What happened today needs to be addressed." Mark nodded. "I agree. If there's anything I can do to help, let me know." As Amara left the security office and walked through the mall's crowded atrium, her head held high, she felt a surge of resolve. She was no longer just a humiliated shopper, but a woman on a mission to confront the prejudice that had tarnished her day. This wasn't over. The air inside the jewelry boutique seemed to grow heavier as Evelyn Hart's baseless accusation rang out, drawing the curious eyes of fellow shoppers. Amara Sinclair, usually composed and confident, now stood under judgmental stares, her heart pounding with anger and disbelief. Mark Dillon, the security officer Evelyn called over, studied Amara carefully. His demeanor was calm, but his approach carried the unmistakable undertone of authority. "Ma'am," Mark said evenly, "we'll need to clear this up. Please come with me." Amara nodded, her pride aching under the public scrutiny. She could see shoppers whispering and others holding phones to record her as she left the boutique. The humiliation was suffocating, but she refused to let it break her. As they walked through the mall, Mark's tone softened. "I just need to understand what happened back there," he said, glancing at her. "I'd be happy to explain," Amara replied, her voice steady despite the chaos of her emotions. They entered the security office, a starkly lit room with monitors lining one wall showing live feeds of the mall. Mark gestured for Amara to sit while he took a seat across from her. "Please, tell me everything," he said, pulling out a notepad. Amara recounted the events in detail, from her polite request to see the necklace to Evelyn's insinuation and eventual accusation. Her words were measured, but the pain and frustration behind them were evident. When she finished, Mark nodded. "Thank you for explaining. I'll review the footage now. If everything checks out, we'll make this right." Amara sat quietly as Mark left the room, the distant hum of mall activity starkly contrasting the turmoil in her mind. She couldn't help but think of Elijah and how he would react to hearing about this. Would he be angry, protective, or both? Mark returned after what felt like an eternity, his expression unreadable. He took a seat and placed a folder between them on the table. "I've reviewed the footage," he said. "It's clear you didn't do anything wrong. Evelyn's accusation was completely unfounded." Relief mingled with indignation as Amara absorbed his words. "Thank you," she said, her voice firm. "But this goes beyond an apology. This isn't just about me. If Evelyn treated me this way, how many others has she humiliated or wronged?" Mark leaned forward, his expression serious. "I understand. If you'd like to take further action, I'll support you however possible. This kind of behavior has no place in the mall." Amara nodded, a plan beginning to form in her mind. "I'll need your help gathering evidence. This needs to be addressed, not just for me but anyone else in my position." Mark agreed, promising to provide her access to security footage and connect her with others with similar stories. Amara walked through the atrium with her head held high when she left the office. Though her humiliation lingered, so did her resolve. That evening back at her home, Amara found Elijah sitting in their living room, his usual calm demeanor replaced with concern when he saw her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, standing to meet her as she set her purse on the kitchen counter. Amara took a deep breath, recounting the humiliating encounter at the boutique. Elijah's expression darkened as she spoke, his hands balling into fists. "They treated you like a criminal," he said, his voice tight with barely restrained anger. "It was awful," Amara admitted, her voice faltering. "Everyone was watching. It felt like they'd already decided I was guilty before I said a word." Elijah pulled her into a comforting embrace. "We won't let this go unanswered," he said firmly. "They need to be held accountable." "I've already started," Amara replied, drawing strength from his support. "Mark, the security officer, reviewed the footage. It shows I didn't do anything wrong. He's willing to help me gather more evidence." "Good," Elijah said, his protective instincts kicking in. "We'll ensure this never happens again, not to you or anyone else." The fire in Amara's chest grew brighter as she listened to her husband's words. This wasn't just about her reputation or dignity, but about standing up against injustice. The next morning, Amara sat at her desk, her phone in hand, preparing to call Mark. The memory of the previous day still stung, but it fueled her determination to seek justice. When Mark answered, his tone was warm but professional. "Amara, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday," he began. "I've seen behavior like Evelyn's before and heard rumors from other employees. I think this goes deeper than just one incident." "I agree," Amara said. "If we can gather enough evidence, we can expose the pattern and force real change." "I'll start pulling more footage," Mark said, "and I know a few employees who might be willing to share their stories." Amara thanked him, her mind already racing with possibilities. She could feel the momentum building and was determined to see it through. This was just the beginning of her fight for justice. Amara Sinclair sat at the corner table of a cozy cafe near Silverbrook Plaza, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of chamomile tea. Across from her sat Mark Dillon, the security officer who had helped her the previous day. His expression was serious, his large frame leaning slightly forward as they strategized. "I've secured a copy of the footage from the boutique," Mark said, sliding a small USB drive across the table. "It clearly shows you didn't steal anything and that Evelyn's behavior was unprofessional at best, discriminatory at worst." "Thank you," Amara replied, her voice calm but resolute. She picked up the drive and tucked it into her handbag. "This will be important, but we'll need more than footage to make our case. We need testimonies, proof that this wasn't an isolated incident." Mark nodded. "I've worked here long enough to know Evelyn isn't the only problem. There are whispers about similar issues at other stores, but people are often too afraid to speak up." Amara frowned, frustration flickering across her face. Fear is exactly what allows these behaviors to persist. If we can show a pattern, if others come forward, we can make them listen. Mark hesitated for a moment before continuing. "There's someone I think you should meet. Carla, one of the assistants at a clothing boutique near the jewelry store, has previously mentioned seeing unfair treatment toward customers. I think she'll talk to you if I ask." "Let's reach out to her," Amara said decisively. "The more voices we have, the stronger our case will be." Later that afternoon, Amara and Mark met Carla at a quiet table in the mall's food court. The young woman looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with the strap of her bag. "Thank you for meeting with us," Amara said warmly, hoping to put Carla at ease. Carla glanced at Mark, who gave her an encouraging nod and took a deep breath. "I've seen what Evelyn does," Carla said, her voice shaky but firm. "She picks on people who don't look like they belong, especially people of color. She's humiliated customers before, but no one ever does anything about it." Amara listened intently, her heart heavy with anger and resolve. "Your testimony is so important, Carla," she said. "If you're willing to speak out, we can bring attention to this and make sure it stops." Carla nodded slowly. "I'll do it. I don't want anyone else to go through what I've seen." Encouraged by Carla's bravery, Amara and Mark began reaching out to other employees in the plaza. Some were hesitant, fearing backlash from their employers, but others were eager to share their stories. That evening, Amara sat with Elijah in their living room, their coffee table covered with notes and documents. She had spent hours documenting the testimonies she and Mark had gathered, and now she was recounting the day's progress to her husband. "Elijah, it's worse than I thought," she said, her voice tinged with frustration and determination. "There's a pattern of discrimination, not just at Radiance Gems, but in several stores across the plaza, and Evelyn's behavior isn't random, it's deliberate." Elijah, who had been silently reviewing one of the testimonies, looked up with a frown. "This isn't just about individual bias," he said thoughtfully. "It sounds systemic, like there's a culture that allows this behavior to thrive." Amara nodded. Mark agrees. He's been digging into the boutique's management structure and thinks there might be a connection to something larger. "We're meeting again tomorrow to go over what he's found." "I'll support you in whatever way I can," Elijah said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "This fight is bigger than us, and it's about making the plaza a place where everyone feels welcome and respected." The next morning, Amara and Mark met again in the mall's security office, a small but functional space lined with monitors displaying live feeds from around the plaza. Mark had spent the night combing through records and employee files from Radiance Gems. "I found something," he said, gesturing for Amara to join him at his desk. He opened a folder containing printed emails and internal memos. "Evelyn has been in regular contact with a man named Richard Carrington. He's connected to Thomas Langston." Amara's stomach sank. "Langston, the investor trying to take over the plaza?" Mark nodded grimly. "Exactly. Langston has been trying to discredit Elijah for months, hoping to force him into selling. Evelyn's actions could be part of that scheme, a deliberate attempt to create controversy and damage your family's reputation." Amara's hands clenched into fists. "So this isn't just about discrimination, it's a calculated attack." "We need to dig deeper," Mark said. "If Langston's involved, we'll need hard evidence to expose him." Determined to uncover the truth, Amara and Mark spent the next several days investigating. They reviewed more footage, interviewed additional employees, and pieced together a growing body of evidence. Along the way, they found an unexpected ally in Vanessa, the owner of a small boutique in the plaza. Vanessa had experienced her own struggles with plaza's management, often feeling overlooked and unsupported as a minority business owner. When she heard about Amara's efforts, she eagerly offered her help. "I've seen what happens when people like Langston are allowed to operate unchecked," Vanessa said during their first meeting. "If he's behind this, we need to expose him." Together, the group worked tirelessly, their shared determination fueling late nights and early mornings. One evening, as Amara prepared to leave the security office, Mark handed her a thick folder filled with their findings. "This is everything we've gathered so far," he said. "It's enough to make a strong case, but we'll need to be strategic about how we present it." Amara looked down at the folder, its weight symbolic of the responsibility she now carried. "We'll need to confront the plaza's management first," she said. "And then, if they refuse to act, we'll take this public." Mark nodded, his expression resolute. "Whatever happens, I'm with you." As Amara left the office and stepped into the cool evening air, she felt a surge of resolve. The fight ahead would be challenging, but she knew she wasn't alone, which made all the difference. The early morning light filtered through the tall windows of the Sinclair residence as Amara sat at her dining table, reviewing the evidence she and Mark had painstakingly gathered. Her laptop screen glowed with surveillance footage, testimony transcriptions, and internal communications from Radiance Gems. Each file painted a damning picture, not only of Evelyn's discriminatory practices, but also of a broader conspiracy connected to Thomas Langston's efforts to discredit Elijah Sinclair. Elijah entered the room, holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "You've been at this since dawn," he said, setting one mug in front of her. "How's it coming along?" Amara sighed, leaning back in her chair. "We're making progress, but it's complicated. Every piece of evidence we uncover points to something bigger. Evelyn's actions aren't just about personal bias, but part of a deliberate scheme." Elijah frowned, his jaw tightening. "Langston's fingerprints are all over this, aren't they?" "Exactly," Amara replied. "Mark found emails linking Evelyn to Richard Carrington, who's a known associate of Langston. It's clear they've been working together to create chaos at the plaza, targeting me as part of their plan to destabilize you." Elijah sat beside her, his expression thoughtful. "If Langston's behind this, We'll need more than just circumstantial evidence to expose him. Have you thought about how to confront him? Amara nodded. Mark and I are meeting Vanessa and a few other employees today. They've agreed to share their experiences. If we can establish a pattern of wrongdoing and connect it to Langston's network, we'll have a solid case. Later that day, Amara arrived at Vanessa's boutique, a bright and welcoming space nestled in a quieter corner of Silverbrook Plaza. Vanessa greeted her warmly, offering her a seat in the back room, where Mark and a few other employees had already gathered. I've been speaking to people around the plaza, Vanessa said as she poured Amara a cup of tea. You're not alone in this, Amara. A lot of us have felt the pressure Langston's people have been applying, whether it's subtle intimidation or outright sabotage. Mark nodded in agreement. Several employees have described incidents similar to what you experienced at Radiance Gems. Evelyn's behavior isn't unique. It's part of a larger culture that Langston seems to have fostered in certain stores. One by one, the employees shared their stories. Carla, the clothing store assistant, spoke again about the constant targeting of customers who didn't look like they belonged. A young man named Jason, who worked in the plaza's electronics store, described how his requests for promotions had been routinely ignored, while less qualified colleagues were advanced. The unspoken message is clear, Jason said. People like me aren't valued here unless we stay silent and keep our heads down. Amara listened carefully, her anger simmering with each new revelation. Thank you for sharing your stories, she said when they finished. Your voices matter, and together we can shine a light on what's been happening here. The group spent the rest of the afternoon organizing their findings, creating a timeline of events that tied Evelyn's actions to Langston's broader strategy. Vanessa, who had experience with grassroots organizing, offered to help prepare their presentation for a meeting with the plaza's management. We need to be precise, Vanessa said, reviewing their notes. If we confront them without a clear plan, they'll dismiss us. But if we present this as a united front with evidence they can't ignore, they'll have no choice but to take action. Amara agreed. And if they refuse, we'll take our case public. The media will want to hear about this, especially with Langston's name attached. That evening, back at the Sinclair residence, Amara and Elijah reviewed the group's findings. They sat side by side in their study, the quiet hum of the neighborhood providing a calm backdrop to their work. This is solid, Elijah said, flipping through the pages of testimony and evidence. Langston won't be able to wriggle out of this if we present it right. Amara rested her chin on her hand, her expression thoughtful. The question is, how far will he go to protect himself? He's already shown he's willing to use underhanded tactics. Elijah reached for her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. You're not alone in this. Amara smiled, drawing strength from his unwavering support. I know, and that's what keeps me going. The next morning, Amara, Mark, and Vanessa stood outside the office of Silverbrook Plaza's director, Eric Warren. The atmosphere was tense as they prepared to present their findings to the man responsible for overseeing the plaza's operations. Eric greeted them cordially, though his guarded expression betrayed his unease. What brings you all here today? He asked, gesturing for them to sit. Amara wasted no time, sliding a folder of documents across his desk. Mr. Warren, we have evidence of systemic discrimination and unethical practices happening under your watch. This includes direct ties to Thomas Langston and his attempts to undermine the plaza's reputation. Eric's eyes widened as he flipped through the folder, his face growing paler with each page. This is serious, he muttered, looking up at Amara. But you must understand, these are serious accusations. Do you have more to back this up? Mark leaned forward. We've brought testimonies from employees and security footage that corroborates the claims. We've also uncovered financial records linking Evelyn Hart to Langston's associate, Richard Carrington. Vanessa added, This isn't just about individual incidents, Mr. Warren. It's about a culture that's been allowed to thrive under your leadership. That has to change. Eric sat back in his chair, his expression conflicted. If what you're saying is true, this goes beyond what I can handle internally. We'll need a full investigation. We expect nothing less, Amara said firmly. But understand this, We're prepared to take this public if no action is taken. The reputation of Silverbrook Plaza depends on your next move." Eric hesitated before nodding. "You have my attention. I'll begin by addressing the immediate concerns and initiating an internal review. If Langston's involvement is confirmed, we'll pursue legal action." Amara stood, extending her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Warren. We'll hold you to that." As the group left the office, a sense of cautious optimism settled over them. They had taken a significant step forward, but the fight was far from over. The sound of clicking cameras and murmuring voices filled the atrium of Silverbrook Plaza as Amara Sinclair stood behind the podium. The polished floors of the luxury mall gleamed under the bright lights, reflecting the tension in the air. Journalists from local and national outlets gathered in front of her, their notebooks and cameras ready to capture her every word. Behind her, Elijah stood with Vanessa and Mark, their presence a silent but powerful show of support. Amara adjusted the microphone, her hands steady despite the weight of the moment. She gazed at the expectant crowd, her voice calm but firm. "Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amara Sinclair, and I'm here today to address a matter of profound importance, not just to me, but to our entire community." She paused, letting her words settle. "Several days ago, I experienced a deeply humiliating and unjust incident at Radiance Gems, a boutique here in Silverbrook Plaza. I was falsely accused of theft and subjected to public humiliation, not because of my actions, but because of preconceived biases about who I am." A murmur rippled through the crowd as Amara continued. "Unfortunately, this was not an isolated incident. Over the past week, my team and I have uncovered evidence of systemic discrimination within several businesses operating in this plaza. We've also found troubling connections between these incidents and deliberate attempts by Thomas Langston, a powerful investor, to undermine the reputation of this mall." The audience stirred, the mention of Langston's name drawing sharp whispers. Elijah stepped forward, holding up a folder filled with documents. "We have gathered substantial evidence, including security footage, employee testimonies, and internal communications that expose a pattern of unethical and discriminatory practices," he said, resonant with authority. Mark joined in, displaying still images from the security footage on a large screen beside the podium. The images showed Evelyn Hart's accusatory gestures and the moments leading up to Amara's unjust treatment. "This footage, along with multiple corroborating testimonies, paints a clear picture of systemic bias," Mark said. "But what's even more concerning is the connection between these incidents and Langston's associates, who have been orchestrating efforts to destabilize the Sinclair family and their business." Vanessa stepped forward next, holding up a statement from an employee who had chosen to remain anonymous. "This isn't just about one person," she said. "It's about a culture that allows discrimination to go unchecked. It's about a calculated attempt to undermine progress and inclusivity for personal gain." The press conference continued, with Amara and her team presenting their findings piece by piece. The room buzzed with outrage and support as they laid out their case. Journalists furiously took notes and live streams of the event across social media. Amara concluded the conference with a powerful call to action. "This plaza is more than just a place to shop. It's a symbol of our community. We cannot allow hatred, bias, or greed to tarnish that. Today, I stand not just for myself, but for everyone who has ever been made to feel unwelcome, undervalued, or unheard. Together, we can demand better. We can create a space where everyone is treated with dignity and respect." The crowd erupted in applause as Amara stepped back, her heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and relief. Elijah placed a hand on her shoulder, his pride evident in his warm smile. "You were incredible," he said softly. Vanessa nodded in agreement. "This is just the beginning, but you've made an impact already. People are listening." As the press conference footage spread online, the response was immediate. Messages of support flooded Amara's inbox, and community leaders reached out to offer their solidarity. Customers who had been unaware of the plaza's deeper issues began sharing their own stories of discrimination, further amplifying the movement. That evening, the Sinclair home was filled with activity as Amara, Elijah, Mark, and Vanessa reviewed the day's events. The dining table was cluttered with laptops, notebooks, and coffee mugs as the group worked late into the night. Langston issued a statement a few hours ago, Mark said, reading from his phone. He's denying everything, of course, and trying to discredit our claims by calling them baseless allegations. Elijah frowned. That's to be expected. He's not going to admit guilt without a fight. Amara leaned forward, her determination unshaken. Then we need to keep the pressure on. The public is on our side, and we have the evidence. Langston can deny all he wants, but he can't erase the truth. Vanessa tapped on her laptop, pulling up social media analytics. The momentum is building. If we continue to engage with the community and share our findings, we can outpace Langston's PR machine. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Amara and her team organized community events at the plaza, inviting employees, customers, and local activists to share their stories and experiences. These events became a powerful platform for solidarity, with attendees voicing their support for Amara's fight against discrimination. At one such event, Vanessa took the stage to address the crowd. "This isn't just about Silverbrook Plaza," she said passionately. "This is about creating a future where no one has to endure what Amara and so many others have faced. It's about standing up to those who would divide us and demanding accountability." Amara followed her, her voice steady as she spoke into the microphone. "Your support means everything. Together, we're sending a message to Langston, the plaza's management, and anyone who thinks they can profit from injustice. We will not be silenced." The crowd erupted in cheers, their energy electrifying. Amara scanned the sea of faces, feeling a profound sense of connection and purpose. This fight wasn't just hers anymore. It belonged to everyone who believed in fairness and equality. Behind the scenes, Elijah worked tirelessly to prepare for the next phase of their battle, legal action against Langston. With the help of a skilled legal team, they compiled the evidence into a comprehensive case that would expose his unethical practices in court. "This will be the turning point," Elijah said during a late-night strategy meeting. "Once this case goes to trial, Langston won't just be fighting us, he'll be facing the law." Amara nodded, her resolve unwavering. "Then let's make sure we're ready. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, it all has to be airtight." Mark added, "Langston might try to delay or dismiss the case, but we'll be prepared for every move he makes." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, a small smile on her face. He thought he could bully his way to the top. He underestimated who he was dealing with. As the trial date approached, Amara felt the weight of the journey she had undertaken. The fight had been exhausting, but it had also revealed her strength and the power of a united community. She knew the battle wasn't over, but she also knew they were closer than ever to achieving justice. The tension in the air was palpable as Amara Sinclair and her team prepared for the upcoming legal battle against Thomas Langston. In the days leading up to the trial, the stakes grew higher. The public's support had turned the tide in their favor, but Langston was relentless, using his influence to muddy the waters. One morning, as Amara and Mark walked through Silverbrook Plaza to gather final testimonies, Mark's phone buzzed in his pocket. He answered the call, his expression growing grim. "What? Are you sure?" Mark's voice tightened and Amara paused to study his face. After a moment he hung up, his eyes meeting hers. "There's been an incident," he said, his tone serious. "One of the stores was vandalized overnight. Broken windows, shelves overturned. It looks staged." Amara's stomach dropped. "You think Langston is behind this?" Mark nodded. "It's likely. He's trying to undermine everything we've built by making it seem like the plaza is unstable." The two rushed to the scene, where a small crowd had gathered around the shattered storefront. Employees stood outside, their faces etched with worry, while security officers worked to cordon off the area. Amara noticed a security camera mounted above the entrance and turned to Mark. "We need that footage," she said. "If this was staged, we can prove it." Mark nodded and quickly got to work, contacting the mall's tech team to access the video. Meanwhile, Amara spoke with the store's manager, a middle-aged woman named Diana. "We came in this morning to find everything like this," Diana explained, gesturing to the broken glass and scattered merchandise. "It's terrifying. I don't know why anyone would target us." Amara placed a reassuring hand on Diana's shoulder. "We're going to get to the bottom of this, I promise." By the afternoon, Mark had retrieved the security footage and was reviewing it with Amara in the mall's security office. On the screen, a shadowy figure could be seen entering the store in the early hours of the morning. The individual moved deliberately, knocking over shelves and smashing displays before fleeing the scene. Mark paused the video, zooming in on a frame where the figure briefly turned toward the camera. The image wasn't entirely clear, but it was enough to identify the culprit. "That's one of Langston's associates," Mark said, pointing to the face on the screen. "We've seen him before in the background of Langston's public appearances." Amara clenched her fists. "He's escalating," she said. "Langston knows we're getting closer to exposing him, so he's trying to create chaos to discredit us." That evening, Amara, Elijah, Mark, and Vanessa gathered at the Sinclair residence to discuss their next steps. The dining table was once again covered in documents and laptops as they strategized. "We have the footage," Mark said, displaying the video on his laptop. "It clearly shows Langston's associate staging the vandalism. We need to release this to the public immediately." Elijah nodded. "We also need to notify the authorities. If we handle this correctly, it will strengthen our case against Langston." Vanessa leaned forward, her expression fierce. "And we should use this as an opportunity to rally more support. People need to see how far Langston is willing to go to protect his interests." Amara agreed. "We'll call a press briefing tomorrow and present the footage. The public deserves to know the truth." The next day, journalists once again filled the atrium of Silverbrook Plaza as Amara and her team prepared to address the media. This time, the mood was different, more urgent, more defiant. Amara stepped up to the podium, her voice strong as she spoke. "Last night, one of the stores here at Silverbrook Plaza was vandalized. At first glance, this might seem like a random act of destruction, but we have evidence to suggest otherwise." She gestured to the screen beside her, where the security footage began to play. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the video revealed the staged nature of the incident and the identity of the culprit. "This man," Amara continued, pointing to the still frame of Langston's associate, "is directly connected to Thomas Langston. This is not a random act, but part of a calculated effort to destabilize Silverbrook Plaza and undermine our community." Elijah took over, his voice resonating with authority. "We have reported this incident to the authorities and are pursuing legal action. We will not allow Langston or anyone else to sabotage what we've built here." The press briefing sparked a wave of outrage. Social media erupted with posts condemning Langston, and calls for justice grew louder. The footage was shared across news outlets, further solidifying the public's support for Amara and her fight. That evening, Vanessa organized a community solidarity event in the plaza's central atrium. Banners reading "Unity Against Injustice" adorned the space, and people from all walks of life gathered to show their support. Vanessa addressed the crowd, her voice filled with passion. "We will not be intimidated. We will not be divided. Together, we stand stronger than any act of sabotage or hate." Amara followed, her voice steady as she spoke into the microphone. "This fight is not just about one mall or one family. It's about creating a community where everyone feels safe, valued, and respected. And we will not stop until that vision is realized." The crowd erupted into cheers, their unity a powerful symbol of resistance against Langston's tactics. Behind the scenes, Elijah worked with their legal team to finalize the case against Langston. The vandalism incident, combined with the earlier evidence of discrimination and unethical practices, created an airtight case. "This is it," Elijah said during a late-night meeting with Amara, Mark, and Vanessa. "Langston has overplayed his hand. The trial will expose everything." Amara nodded, her resolve unwavering. "We've come too far to stop now. No matter what he tries next, we'll be ready." Mark leaned back in his chair, a small smile playing on his lips. He thought he could silence us with fear. He didn't realize he was dealing with people who refused to back down. As the group wrapped up their meeting, Amara felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be difficult, but the tide had turned in their favor. The fight wasn't over, but the finish line was finally in sight. The buzz of anticipation filled the courthouse as Amara Sinclair and her team arrived for the first day of the trial against Thomas Langston. Journalists lined the steps outside, cameras flashing and microphones thrust forward, eager to capture every moment of the high-profile case. Amara paused briefly, flanked by Elijah and Mark, to address the crowd. "We are here today to hold Thomas Langston accountable for his actions," she said firmly. "This case is about more than just one person. It's about ensuring justice for everyone who has been wronged and proving that no one is above the law." The group entered the building, their determination palpable. Inside, the courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and legal teams. At the defense table, Langston sat with his high-powered lawyers, his expression smug, but his posture tense. Amara took a deep breath as she settled into her seat. The culmination of weeks of work and countless sleepless nights was finally here, and she was ready to see it through. The prosecution opened with a powerful argument, outlining Langston's history of unethical practices and presenting the evidence Amara and her team had painstakingly gathered. The security footage from the vandalism, the emails linking Langston to Evelyn Hart and Richard Carrington, and the testimonies from employees and customers painted a clear picture of his calculated attempts to destabilize Silverbrook Plaza. The footage of the staged vandalism drew audible gasps from the courtroom as it played on the screen. The prosecutor emphasized the connection between the man in the video and Langston's business operations. "This was not a random act of violence," the prosecutor declared. "It was a deliberate effort to undermine a thriving community and tarnish the reputation of the Sinclair family for personal gain." Amara was called to the stand on the second day of the trial. She sat tall and composed, her hands folded neatly in her lap as she faced the defense attorney's cross-examination. "Mrs. Sinclair," the attorney began, his tone sharp, "isn't it true that your accusations against Mr. Langston are based on speculation? After all, you have no direct evidence linking him to the vandalism or the discrimination you claim occurred." Amara met his gaze without flinching. "That's incorrect. We have emails and financial records connecting Mr. Langston to the individuals involved. The security footage clearly shows one of his associates committing the vandalism. This isn't speculation, it's fact." The defense attorney tried to rattle her with insinuations about her motivations, but Amara remained steadfast. "My only motivation is justice," she said firmly. "Not just for myself, but for every person who has faced discrimination or been made to feel unwelcome because of systemic bias." Mark was the next to take the stand. His testimony focused on the security footage and his investigation into Langston's network. As a former mall security officer, his insights carried significant weight. "Based on my review of the evidence," Mark said, "it's clear that these incidents were not isolated. They were coordinated efforts designed to harm the Sinclair family's reputation and disrupt operations at Silverbrook Plaza." The defense attempted to discredit Mark's findings, but his detailed explanations and unwavering demeanor left little room for doubt. Vanessa followed, sharing her experiences as a minority business owner in the plaza and recounting the stories of other employees who had come forward. Her heartfelt testimony struck a chord with the jury, illustrating the human impact of Langston's actions. "When people like Thomas Langston use their power to exploit and intimidate, it sends a message that our voices don't matter," Vanessa said. "But I stand here today to say that we will not be silenced. We deserve better, and we're fighting for a future where everyone is treated with dignity." As the trial progressed, Langston's defense team grew increasingly desperate. They attempted to shift blame onto lower-level employees and argued that Langston had no knowledge of their actions. However, the evidence and testimonies presented by Amara's team were too compelling to dismiss. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the final days of the trial approached. In a bold move, the prosecution called Langston himself to the stand, forcing him to answer for his actions. Langston's composure faltered under the prosecutor's relentless questioning. He denied any involvement in the vandalism and discrimination, but struggled to explain the damning emails and financial transactions linking him to Carrington and Evelyn Hart. The prosecutor pressed him. "Mr. Langston, if you had no knowledge of these actions, why are there multiple records of your communication with the individuals responsible?" Langston stammered, his carefully crafted facade beginning to crack. Those were business discussions. They had nothing to do with this." But these business discussions coincide with the timeline of the vandalism and discriminatory incidents, the prosecutor countered. Isn't it true that you orchestrated these events to destabilize the Sinclair family's business and force them to sell Silverbrook Plaza? Langston's silence spoke volumes. On the final day of the trial, both sides delivered their closing arguments. The prosecution urged the jury to consider the overwhelming evidence and the clear intent behind Langston's actions. This case is about accountability, the prosecutor said. It's about standing up to those who abuse their power and ensuring that justice is served. Langston's defense attempted to paint him as a victim of circumstance, but the damage had been done. The jury deliberated for several hours before returning with their verdict. As the foreperson stood to deliver the decision, the courtroom held its collective breath. We, the jury, find the defendant, Thomas Langston, guilty of conspiracy to commit sabotage and engage in discriminatory practices, the foreperson announced. Amara felt a wave of relief and triumph wash over her as the words sank in. Langston's face fell, his arrogance replaced with a look of defeat. The judge sentenced Langston to a significant fine and community service, along with a court-ordered investigation into his business dealings. Outside the courthouse, Amara and her team were met with cheers and applause from the gathered crowd. Journalists clamored for interviews, but Amara spoke directly to the supporters who had stood by her throughout the ordeal. "This victory belongs to all of us," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "We have proven that justice can prevail, even against the most powerful adversaries. Together, we have made a difference, and together, we will continue to fight for what's right." The crowd erupted into applause, the energy electric. As Amara stepped back, Elijah wrapped an arm around her shoulders, his pride evident. "You did it," he said softly. "No," Amara replied, smiling through her tears. "We did it." The morning sun streamed through the windows of Silverbrook Plaza's newly renovated administration office, bathing the room in a warm glow. Amara Sinclair sat at the head of the table, her presence commanding yet welcoming. Around her sat the members of the mall's newly formed advisory board, a diverse group of individuals from all walks of life. They had been chosen not only for their expertise, but for their shared commitment to inclusivity and fairness. "This meeting marks a new chapter for Silverbrook Plaza," Amara began, her voice steady and confident. "We've faced challenges, but we've also come together to create meaningful change. Today, we'll discuss the policies and programs that will ensure this mall becomes a symbol of unity and respect." The board members nodded in agreement as Amara outlined the initiatives they had planned. Among them were mandatory sensitivity training for all employees, a strict anti-discrimination policy, and the establishment of an anonymous hotline for reporting incidents. Mark Dillon, who now served as the board's head of security and compliance, presented a plan for regular audits and monitoring. "We'll conduct quarterly reviews of employee practices and customer interactions to ensure these policies are being upheld," he said. Vanessa, now a vocal leader within the community, added, "We should also host public events that celebrate diversity and bring people together. This mall isn't just a place to shop. It's a space where people from all backgrounds can feel welcome." The board agreed enthusiastically, brainstorming ideas for cultural festivals, workshops, and panel discussions. As the meeting progressed, Amara felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was the kind of change she envisioned, a tangible, lasting transformation beyond her personal fight for justice. Over the following weeks, the changes began to take shape. Large banners with messages of unity and inclusivity were hung throughout the mall, declaring, "Everyone belongs here." Employees attended training sessions led by diversity experts, and the hotline for reporting concerns was promoted across the plaza. Amara worked closely with Elijah to ensure the mall's expansion plans reflected their commitment to diversity. Several new stores were introduced, many of them owned by minority entrepreneurs. These businesses brought fresh energy to the plaza, offering unique products and services that resonated with the community. "We're not just rebuilding," Elijah said during one of their walks through the bustling mall. "We're setting a new standard for what a business can be." Amara smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "This is what we fought for, a place where everyone feels valued and respected." One of the highlights of the transformation was a week-long cultural festival organized by Vanessa. The atrium was transformed into a vibrant space filled with colorful displays, music, and food, representing cultures from around the world. On the opening night, Amara took the stage to address the gathered crowd. Families with children, young couples, and elderly patrons filled the space, their faces lit with excitement. "This festival is a celebration of who we are as a community," Amara said, her voice carrying through the atrium. "It's a testament to the strength we find in our diversity and the unity we achieve when we come together. Silverbrook Plaza is more than just a mall. It reflects all of us." The crowd erupted into cheers, their applause echoing through the space. Amara stepped back, letting the performances and festivities take center stage. Behind the scenes, Elijah worked tirelessly to strengthen the mall's financial standing. Langston's defeat had sent ripples through the business world, and many investors were eager to align themselves with the Sinclairs, seeing them as champions of justice and integrity. "We've turned a crisis into an opportunity," Elijah said one evening as he and Amara reviewed their expansion plans. "This is our chance to build something truly extraordinary." Amara nodded, her eyes scanning the blueprints spread out before them. "It's not just about the physical space," she said. "It's about the values we're embedding into every corner of this mall. People will see that and feel it when they walk through these doors." As the grand reopening of Silverbrook Plaza approached, the community's excitement was palpable. The plaza had undergone a complete transformation, from its policies to its physical appearance. The grand reopening was set to feature speeches, performances, and the unveiling of a plaque commemorating the changes. On the day of the event, Amara stood with Elijah, Mark, and Vanessa on a stage in the atrium, facing a sea of smiling faces. The air was filled with a sense of hope and possibility. Elijah began the ceremony, his voice rich with emotion. "Today, we celebrate not just the reopening of Silverbrook Plaza, but the beginning of a new era. This mall stands as a testament to what we can achieve when we work together with integrity and purpose." Amara stepped forward next, her heart pounding as she addressed the crowd. "This journey has been challenging, but it has also been inspiring. Together, we've shown that change is possible, that justice is worth fighting for, and that unity is our greatest strength. Silverbrook Plaza belongs to all of us, and I'm honored to share this moment with you." The audience erupted in applause as the plaque was unveiled, its inscription reading, "Silverbrook Plaza, a place of unity, justice, and inclusion, dedicated to the strength of our community." As the celebration continued late into the evening, Amara took a moment to step outside onto one of the mall's terraces. The stars twinkled above, a reminder of the vast possibilities ahead. Elijah joined her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "We've come so far," he said, his voice filled with pride. "And there's still so much more to do," Amara replied, her gaze steady and determined. Elijah smiled. "But if anyone can do it, it's you." Amara leaned into him, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. Together, they had turned adversity into triumph, creating a legacy of justice and inclusivity that would inspire generations to come. The Sinclair residents buzzed with energy as friends, family, and allies gathered to celebrate the success of their journey. The sprawling backyard, illuminated by soft string lights, was filled with laughter, music, and the aroma of delicious food. This wasn't just a party. It reflected everything they had fought for and achieved together. Amara stood near the garden fountain, a glass of sparkling cider in her hand as she greeted guests. Vanessa approached with a wide smile, holding a plate of hors d'oeuvres. "Amara, this is incredible," Vanessa said, her voice warm with admiration. "Look around. Everyone here is part of something so much bigger than themselves. You made this possible." Amara smiled, her gratitude shining through. "We all did, Vanessa. None of this would have happened without everyone's support and dedication." Nearby, Mark stood with a group of colleagues, recounting stories of the trial and the plaza's transformation. "It was tough," he said, his tone reflective. "But seeing the changes we've made, it's worth every late night and every hurdle we faced." Elijah, holding a glass of red wine, joined Amara's side. He leaned in to whisper, "You've been the star of the night, as usual, but have you had a chance to take a break and enjoy it?" Amara laughed softly. "Not yet. It's been non-stop conversations and thank yous, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. Elijah gestured toward a small seating area beneath a canopy of lights. Let's take a moment to ourselves. You've earned it. Bookmark, go back. As the couple settled into the cozy nook, the sound of the celebration faded into the background. Amara exhaled deeply, her mind finally quieting after weeks of relentless focus. Do you ever think about how far we've come? Elijah asked, his tone contemplative. All the time, Amara replied. It's incredible to look back and see how one moment, one spark of injustice, turned into something so transformative. Elijah nodded, his gaze thoughtful. What's even more remarkable is how many people joined us along the way. This fight became bigger than us because it resonated with so many others. Amara reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining. I think that's what gives me the most hope. Knowing that this wasn't just about us, it was about creating a foundation for something better. As the evening progressed, the guests began to gather near a makeshift stage set up in the garden. Vanessa took the microphone first, her smile lighting up the crowd. Tonight is a celebration of resilience, unity, and justice, she began. We faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, but we overcame them together. And at the center of it all was Amara Sinclair, a woman whose courage and determination inspired us all. The crowd erupted into applause, and Vanessa gestured for Amara to join her on stage. Amara hesitated for a moment, then made her way forward, her heart pounding with a mix of nerves and gratitude. As she took the microphone, the applause swelled again, a testament to the respect and admiration she had earned. Thank you, Amara said, her voice strong despite the emotion welling within her. Tonight isn't just about celebrating what we've accomplished. It's about recognizing what's possible when we come together for a common cause. She paused, scanning the crowd. Every person here played a role in making this happen. Whether you testified in court, supported us in the community, or simply stood by our side, you made a difference. This victory belongs to all of us. Amara's voice grew softer, more reflective. This journey wasn't easy, and it's far from over, but we've proven that change is possible. We've shown that when we stand together, we are stronger than any obstacle. As she finished, the crowd rose to their feet, their applause thunderous. Amara stepped back, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Elijah joined her, wrapping his arm around her as they waved to the cheering guests. The celebration continued late into the night, the atmosphere filled with joy and camaraderie. Mark, Vanessa, and other key allies shared stories and reflected on the impact of their work. We've set a precedent, Mark said, as he clinked glasses with Vanessa. What we've done here will inspire others to stand up and fight for what's right. Vanessa nodded. And Silverbrook Plaza will be a shining example of what can happen when businesses embrace inclusivity and justice. Amara and Elijah moved through the crowd, thanking guests and soaking in the warmth of the evening. By the time the party began to wind down, the couple found themselves alone in the garden, the twinkling lights above them mirroring the stars in the clear night sky. Amara sighed contentedly, leaning into Elijah's embrace. This feels like a dream, she said softly. It's real, Elijah replied, his voice filled with pride. And it's because of you. Amara smiled, her eyes glistening. Because of us, we did this together. The two stood in comfortable silence for a moment, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The challenges they had faced felt distant now, overshadowed by the victory achieved and the lives they had touched. What do you think comes next? Amara asked, her tone curious. Whatever we choose, Elijah said with certainty, the future is ours to shape. Amara nodded, a renewed sense of purpose settling over her. Then, let's make it count. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, the Sinclair residence grew quiet once more. The celebration had ended, but its spirit lingered, a reminder of the power of resilience, unity, and hope. Amara and Elijah, side by side, looked ahead to the future with hearts full of gratitude and determination. They knew the fight for justice was never truly over, but they were ready for whatever came together next. The story of Amara Sinclair is one of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of unity. What began as a harrowing experience of prejudice grew into a movement for justice and change. Through her determination and the support of her community, Amara turned a personal injustice into a victory that uplifted everyone involved. This story reminds us of the importance of standing up against discrimination and the strength we find in solidarity. It teaches us that no matter how overwhelming the challenges may seem, perseverance and unity can overcome even the most daunting obstacles. Amara's journey serves as an inspiration to all of us to take action, to speak out against injustice, and to work toward a brighter, more inclusive future. If you think this story is good, comment with 1. If you think it's amazing, comment with 2. And don't hesitate to share your own stories with us. Bookmark, go back. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this one. Share your thoughts on this tale in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you.